the United States secured its most significant territorial triumph of the War of 1812 at the Battle of New Orleans. This decisive encounter foiled British attempts to seize a vital American harbor and propelled Major General Andrew Jackson to national prominence. Following Napoleon's capitulation in the spring of 1814, the British redirected their military resources to intensify their campaign in America. They strategically targeted coastal areas and the pillars of American commerce and transportation, culminating in the incendiary attack on Washington in August 1814. Despite their failure to capture Baltimore in the subsequent month, British forces persisted with their plans to assault New Orleans. Forewarned of a potential incursion along the Gulf Coast, Andrew Jackson, the commander of the U.S. 7th Military District, departed from Mobile, Alabama, for New Orleans on November 22nd. Having been recently elevated to the rank of Major General in the regular army after his victorious campaign against the Creek Indians, Jackson arrived in the city on December 1st. He undertook the formidable task of rallying a diverse force. This force ultimately comprised Tennessee and Kentucky frontiersmen, members of the Louisiana militia, businessmen from New Orleans, free men of color, Choctaw Indians, the smuggler Jean Lafitte and his band of privateers, along with sailors, Marines, and regular United States troops. On January 8, 1815, Major General Andrew Jackson's rapidly mobilized forces achieved a decisive victory over the more experienced and numerous British troops. The stunning American success at the Battle of New Orleans quickly became emblematic of American democratic ideals prevailing over antiquated European concepts of aristocracy and privilege. This battle marked the final significant military confrontation between the United States and Britain. British Vice Admiral Alexander Cochrane's fleet anchored near Ship Island, approximately 60 miles east of New Orleans, on December 8th. Following the elimination of an American squadron on Lake Bourne, Cochrane, alongside the interim army commander, Major General John Keane, strategized to transport the British infantry through the adjacent bayous, plotting a southern approach to the city. The British troops disembarked south of New Orleans on the morning of December 23rd. Upon learning of the British landing, Jackson promptly mobilized his forces to confront the adversary. Executing a bold nocturnal attack, American forces engaged the British encampment. The skirmish was fierce yet indecisive, and after several hours, Jackson strategically withdrew 2 miles north to the Rodriguez Canal. There, the American forces commenced the rapid construction of defensive earthworks, which would be later known as Line Jackson, extending from the Mississippi River for 3/4 of a mile toward a cypress swamp. Additionally, a naval artillery position was established on the river's right bank. On December 25th, General Sir Edward Pakenham arrived and took charge of the British Expeditionary Corps. Frustrated by his predecessor's failures to overpower Jackson and seize New Orleans, Pakenham advanced his troops to the Chalmette Plantation, located about 5 miles southeast of the city, on December 27th. In the subsequent 5 days, Pakenham orchestrated 2 assaults against Line Jackson, both of which the American defenders stoutly repelled. Facing limited alternatives and encouraged by the arrival of additional troops, Pakenham resolved to initiate a significant offensive on the morning of January 8, 1815. On January 8th, before dawn, the British commenced their assault. To the British left, Major General John Keane's infantry breached an unfinished redoubt, but was swiftly checked by the stalwart defense of the New Orleans Rifles and the 7th U.S. Infantry. Concurrently, Major General Samuel Gibbs led a column against the American left center, which was promptly decimated by the sharpshooting of Tennessee and Kentucky militia. Gibbs himself was fatally injured during the onslaught. In an attempt to encourage his faltering forces, Pakenham advanced with his staff, only to be struck down by a barrage of American fire. He was evacuated from the battleground and subsequently succumbed to his injuries. Within a mere half hour, the 2 British divisions under Gibbs and Keane suffered 2,000 casualties out of 3,000 men. A Kentucky soldier later recounted the scene, stating, "When the smoke cleared and we had a clear view of the field, it appeared at first as though a crimson tide had washed over it. This was not due to blood, but to the red uniforms worn by the British soldiers. The field was strewn with their fallen bodies. Devastated by the robust American defense at Line Jackson, the surviving British troops retreated beyond the range of American artillery. Despite a momentary breakthrough by Colonel William Thornton against the American Marine Battery on the right bank, Pakenham's successor, Major General John Lambert, found the situation irretrievable and ordered Thornton's forces to withdraw. Why did the Battle of New Orleans take place subsequent to the ratification of a peace treaty between the American and British governments? Despite the fact that American and British negotiators had concluded a peace treaty in Ghent on December 24, 1814, the news had not yet reached American shores by January 8, 1815. Consequently, neither the military forces engaged in combat nor the United States Congress were apprised of the treaty's signing. Hence, hostilities persisted, and the defense of the strategically important port of New Orleans remained a crucial endeavor for American forces. This pivotal battle, which marked the conclusion of the War of 1812, effectively solidified the United States' triumph and garnered the nascent nation international esteem. However, one might question the necessity of the battle given the pre-existing accord. It should be noted that the treaty explicitly stated that hostilities would cease only upon ratification by both nations' governments. Therefore, the Battle of New Orleans was indeed warranted. The Treaty of Ghent received ratification from Congress only on February 16, 1815, which was over a month subsequent to the battle. With the exception of a handful of diplomatic tensions, the treaty commenced a bicentennial era of peace between the United States and Britain. Why did General Jackson recruit the smuggler Jean Lafitte and his band of privateers for the Battle of New Orleans? Prior to the War of 1812, Lafitte and his siblings orchestrated a profitable contraband enterprise in Louisiana. They acquired slaves at minimal cost in the West Indies and sold them at a premium in New Orleans, capitalizing on the heightened prices due to a federal prohibition on slave importation. Furthermore, the Lafitte brothers engaged in operations for Cartagena, present-day Colombia, with the objective of undermining Spanish trade. The commodities they seized were illicitly sold in Louisiana, with Barataria Bay serving as their strategic stronghold. This bay, shielded by islands and bayous south of New Orleans, provided an ideal sanctuary for their smuggling activities. The Baratarians, as Lafitte's followers were known, were continually at risk of apprehension and incarceration by United States customs agents and the Spanish Navy alike. Barataria Bay's waters were sufficiently deep for Lafitte to navigate into the Caribbean Sea with ease, yet shallow enough to deter pursuit by Spanish naval forces. In the milieu of the War of 1812, the British endeavored to recruit Lafitte, promising substantial remuneration for his assistance against the Americans at New Orleans. However, Lafitte countered with an offer to the Louisiana governor. His support in vanquishing the British in return for absolution from all charges related to his smuggling operations. The Louisiana legislature spurned Lafitte's proposal, and as a result, the privateer found himself beleaguered by both nations without any formal allegiance. The tide turned for Lafitte with Major General Andrew Jackson's arrival in New Orleans in 1815. Aware of the Baratarians' repute as formidable artillerists and their intimate knowledge of the local terrain, Jackson acknowledged his need for their expertise. Despite reservations concerning their fidelity and habitual lawlessness, he re-evaluated Lafitte's proposition. Jackson's decision proved astute. In the Battle of New Orleans, approximately 50 Baratarians operated artillery on American vessels and managed land-based defenses. The rapport between Jackson and Lafitte grew to the extent that Lafitte became Jackson's de facto adjutant. Post-war, President James Madison recognized Lafitte's contributions with a comprehensive pardon. Yet, this improbable veteran of the Battle of New Orleans later continued his unauthorized ventures on Galveston Island within Spanish Texas. How it ended? The United States emerged victorious when the British, taking a calculated risk, launched a frontal assault against American troops entrenched within fortified earthworks composed of mud and cotton bales along the eastern bank of the Mississippi at Chalmette Plantation. The offensive resulted in disproportionately high British casualties compared to those sustained by the Americans. This resounding success propelled Jackson onto a path that culminated in his ascension to the presidency 13 years thereafter.